has continued, and the work here has continued and grown and deepened under Chris's leadership, and Raquel, with you and the other staff. I've really enjoyed watching you grow and develop from afar over at HUD. And I do want to, just start off by saying my experience at HUD was an incredible honor and an incredible opportunity, and one of the most fun things I've ever done. We put together an amazing team in the Office of Housing and in, HUD overall. Everyone I worked with was so smart and mission focused. And the department accomplished many, many things during the Biden-Harris administration. I'll focus mostly on what we did in the Office of Housing, but of course, the many other things that other offices did that relate to what those of you on this call care about, like the home rule and all the different rounds of funding that came out during our time there, pro housing, the price fund, all of these things that advanced the cause of affordable housing in the United States and made HUD an incredible federal partner to so many stakeholders out there, states and localities and nonprofits and, lenders, developers, servicers. Really, to me, kind of a peak experience of how government can be helpful. And we will need to talk about how quickly that's changed. But first, let's dwell for another few minutes on what we accomplished while we were there. So there are a few things that I really focused on that were important to me that I think will be of particular interest to this audience. In terms of the single family FHA program, first and foremost, we reduced prices at a time where nobody else was reducing prices on anything. And not only were we able to reduce the mortgage insurance premium, but we were able to do that while keeping the capital reserve fund as well capitalized as it had been before we reduced the prices. And in fact, the capital reserve is at a level that is practically 6 times what Congress requires it to be at. So FHA at this point has something that actually looks much more like bank level capital than full faith and credit government program capital. Very, very proud of our work on that. But we did a few other things that I think were really important too. We made a change to underwriting that many of us have been advocating for years, which is we found a way to count somebody's positive rental history as a favorable factor in their underwriting. And in the preliminary evaluations that were completed before I left the building, who knows if there will ever be any more evaluations, we found that just that small change was making a difference for literally thousands of borrowers. So it was a long overdue change. I'm really glad we were able to make that happen. A few other things that we did. One is we allowed income from accessory dwelling units to be counted toward underwriting for a loan, and not just income of existing ADUs with existing tenants, which is what the GSEs count, but we actually took a step further and we were able to count a portion of prospective income with the goal of actually incentivizing people to build or renovate those ADUs and then lease them up. And so we're really excited about that as we see more and more jurisdictions accepting ADUs. Something else we did that came straight from my work at NCST was we updated the 203K renovation loan program. Now, some issues with that program are, statutory, and we didn't have, uh, much that we could do, but we made some very, very meaningful changes that I think will make the 203K a good option for many people. And it will be an increasingly good option the longer we are at the interest rate levels that we're at right now. I think one of the most meaningful changes we made to 203K was we really more than doubled the level of expenditure under which you could do a streamlined K. And for folks who do any kind of development using 203K, you know that the streamlined product is easier to use, much less complicated, doesn't require the consultant. And, with the 75,000 level that we raised it to, you can actually do a lot for a house with $75,000, even in the high cost markets. So we were very, very proud of doing that. We changed how the consultants, how much the consultants get paid, in the hope to make it much easier to find consultants. And we also lengthened all of the timelines so that the program better lines up with what we all see in the market right now, when there are shortages of contractors and shortages of supplies and all of that. So, full lists of what we changed are available online, but that was something that was really important to me going in. Another thing that we did that was, again, straight from our work at NCST, was finally finalizing rulemaking on note sales. We codified a lot of what HUD had already been doing. The requirement of doing loss mitigation, and a lot of the rules around how nonprofits intersect with the note sales. We held a number of HECM note sales while I was there. And in all of those, we offered, a percentage of the loans that were in the sale were in a nonprofit set aside. A lot of nonprofits did end up taking down these loans. And, the processes for doing that are now included in the rulemaking going forward. So these are just some examples. I mean, I have a long list of things that we did and accomplished, but I want to give you the chance to ask me more questions.
Yeah, I was just gonna say this is great and just a good way to start our call off, Julia, and so much of the work that continues, right? Well, we'll see how much of that happens. But the next question is really more about sort of the policy issues that need to be continued for focusing on housing and of course advocacy. And so getting your thoughts on that is it will be incredible as well.
So something I spent an enormous amount of time on was helping homeowners make it through the pandemic period. And that started out with the COVID, or what some people call the CARES Act forbearances, although FHA started doing those forbearances before the CARES Act was passed. Those forbearances gave literally millions of families an opportunity to ride out the pandemic without having to worry about whether they'd be able to pay their mortgage. Looking back on that program, it's truly one of the great government success stories of our time. There was, when we embarked on what was really an experiment with this, which is these streamlined forbearances that people could get, we didn't know what was going to happen. We were jumping into uncharted waters. And there was a moment there early in the pandemic where FHA's delinquency rate was close to 12%, because of all the people some who had taken forbearances, some who had just lost their income, or encountered either a health or other financial hardship. And now when we, really only about a year and a half after that, we saw delinquency rates come back down to normal levels for FHA. That was a tremendous accomplishment. And part of it was accomplished through our ability to create a new loss mitigation framework that was based on the idea of streamlining, the idea of not overwhelming people with having to do paperwork, and with a focus on payment reduction rather than a focus on sort of the previously used sort of affordability metrics, which had never been very precise to begin with. All the data from both the foreclosure crisis, in 2008 through 2010, as well as the pandemic, all of the data from both of them shows that the most meaningful way to keep people in their home is payment reduction on their mortgage, whether it's, temporary or permanent, but payment reduction is really important. Using the lessons from COVID, one of the last things we did in office was to put out a new standard loss mitigation regime. We took all the lessons of COVID and we baked them into like a new and improved permanent toolkit for solutions. This was done with extensive engagement with the industry, with servicers, with consumer advocates, with lenders, and of course with our own risk team looking at the health of the FHA mortgage insurance fund. And what we tried to do was craft solutions that would really be a win for everybody. And I think we got there. We made some changes that were really important for the sustainability of loss mitigation. I think most notably limiting the number of solutions a borrower can get. Like that borrowers couldn't come back every month to ask for a new solution because we were seeing a lot of churning like that. So we put some guardrails around that, but we really codified the streamlined nature of the solutions and really focused on that payment reduction as the most effective way to keep people in their homes. And the reason I'm telling you all this, aside from that I feel like it was a huge success story for us, is that I am concerned that loss mitigation is at risk in this administration. I think there's going to be some difference of view between the political leadership that comes from the mortgage industry, which is very supportive of what we did, and either the DOGE folks or the political leadership that is coming more from the Project 2025 perspective. And I think it's really important for every person on this call, if you touch single family lending or mortgage at all, to be working with other organizations, with lenders, with servicers, with your localities, with whoever you know, to help shore up support for keeping this loss mitigation regime in place. I am worried about it. There has been a lot of misinformation out there, just plain facts that, alleged facts that are just plain wrong. There was a Wall Street Journal editorial attacking loss mitigation that was simply incorrect. But right now it's hard to find the voices who are going to speak up and raise their head or raise their hand and say that's wrong. Everybody's nervous right now. And it's very understandable why everybody's nervous right now. I don't blame anybody. Anybody who's going into their website and taking out certain words, so you don't become a target. This is, this is a rational response to what we're seeing right now. Um, but for the sake of both the 7.5 million FHA single-family borrowers and for the sake of the, you know, 45 million people in America with mortgages, I think it's really, really important for everybody to understand that loss mitigation saves everybody money. It saves the borrower money, it saves the servicer money, and it saves FHA money. Um, this is not a government subsidy. This is the opposite of a government subsidy. And it's so important to protect that. So, that's one thing I want to talk about. When I talk about other policy things that are really imperative, we can't let the climate denialism take away focus on the effect that natural disasters are having on our housing stock. Not just the physical impact on the homes themselves, but also the effect on the cost of insurance, which is becoming increasingly affordable in both the home ownership and rental spaces. All of that is, all these issues are connected. And we have to keep our eye on this ball because no matter what political party or ideology is ascendant at any particular moment, it's not going to stop the rivers from rising or the hailstorms from beating up your roofs. Um, you know, Fire, hurricane, tornado, we've seen it all in the past, there's no week anymore where we don't see multiple situations that threaten both our housing stock and the people who live in those homes. Um, Something that we worked on while I was in office is delivering about $1.5 billion to HUD's project-based rental assistance properties. These are the properties that, there are about 10,000 or so properties that have a contract with HUD to keep units affordable. So it's the part of Section 8 that runs with the unit rather than running with an individual voucher. And we got all this money out there for retrofitting these properties to make them more energy efficient, more climate resilient, and basically less expensive to operate and safer for the residents. The new administration has, although all of the money was obligated before we left, the new administration has paused payment on those awards. We're trying to get, to get the information out there about what these awards are for. These are awards to private property owners that will help them with their costs, which is something that this administration claims it wants to do. And so, I think this program has gotten swept up in this sort of purge of anything that has the word climate in it. But what I've been trying to emphasize to people is this is not a program about, feelings or ideology. This is a program about like hard costs and the weather. So, any help we can get trying to dislodge that money is really important as well.
Thank you for that, Julia. And like you said, I mean, I sit here in Florida and you know this, lots of seasons that come by and it just feels like you said it is all year long with different elements of weather related uh, issues. Kind of continuing along the lines of what's been happening lately, and especially with the cuts that we're seeing in jobs and just all around cuts to different things. What do you feel maybe an impact on HUD's ability to do, the work that you left doing and going forward? Massive cuts for HUD. What's your reflection or insight on that.
Well, honestly, it took almost all of the last administration just to replace all the people that had left during the previous administration. And even at our highest number, we still often saw demand that was more than the number of staff we had, could handle. So we know that significant cuts in staff will impact services. Now, it's true that FHA is a public-private partnership. Loans are, the actual loans are made by private lenders. But the fact is, there is so much interaction with HUD at every point during the lending process. Now, it's a much heavier interaction on the multifamily and healthcare side than on the single family side. But even on the single family side, the the FHA National Servicing Center is continually taking calls from originators and lenders. Things always come up. There's always some weird thing that nobody's seen before, and they need to, they need to get some advice on it. So I am concerned that if they cut significant staff from FHA, they really are going to impede the number of loans that can be made. And then the multifamily side, we're underwriting, particularly the FHA's construction to permanent loan, which is one of the only places you can get one of those loans. The GSEs don't do them. Those are time-intensive underwriting processes. Now, one of the things that just happened in the past week is a judge ordered the probationary employees who had been RIFed to be reinstated. I'm hoping a lot of people will go back. We had just hired a lot of underwriters that were really needed, particularly on the multifamily side. And of course, many of those people are presidential management fellows or other people coming in through special programs that help us get the best and the brightest people into the government. All of those people were affected by that RIF of probationary employees. And I hope everybody knows that probationary employees doesn't mean you are on probation because you did a bad thing. It means when you're a government employee with less than 2 years of service. So I'm hoping those folks will go back. We are still hearing a desire to cut the staff as much as by half. And I think that would be really catastrophic. And I understand that one of the things DOGE wants to do is to use technology better and to make the government procurement process better. I will say I am totally down with that. Those are two things that were very frustrating for me in the government, and they really could use fixing. And if, the tech whizzes coming on board can fix some of those things, I am supportive of that. But there's no CEO that would fire people first and then fix things second. You fix the systems, and then yes, you may find there are certain things you can do with fewer people, and then you can downsize. But that is the direction that this should happen in.
Thank you for that. Julie, just kind of continuing on, I know you mentioned, especially out of the big wins that you shared with us earlier, the 203K program, FHA 203K program, as you look at where there could be attempts to reform programs at FHA HUD. Do you think this is at risk? I mean, there's a lot that you were able to get accomplished with it. I can just hear Jerry flick right now. But what are your thoughts on whether this is part of that low-hanging fruit that gets hit with reform?
So again, what I would tell anybody is there's plenty of room for improving government. If nobody yet has called me up from DOGE to sit down with me and say, what would you improve based on your experience running this program? I have a long list of things that could be improved. So it's not that there's not room for improvement. It's that the improvement has to be smart. And whether it's changes to processes or whether it's changes to personnel, it needs to be done in a way that's responsive to the way the programs really are supposed to work. Um, and, you know, I, it's a little opaque right now what's happening.
Thank you. We're wrapping up our questions and we'll open it up to the audience here. But just before we do that, do you feel that there are things that the industry right now are getting right and should continue to focus on? I know you mentioned some of your own personal insights on that. Do you think there are larger things that the industry is getting right about housing right now, or is it hard to
I mean,
is it hard to
there's
say?
no doubt that the housing industry writ large,
Mhm.
whether you're looking at sort of single family mortgage or the rental side of things, people are trying to use all the creativity they have to solve the problem of affordability. We have a desperate shortage of housing supply. I'm sitting right now in a conference room because I'm at a conference with the industry focused exclusively on housing supply. And, lots and, the mortgage servicing industry, I think, is so much stronger than it was, you know, 10, 15, or even 5 years ago. It's made enormous strides. And I feel like so many things have been uh, accomplished, and the creativity I see out there, whether it's around manufactured housing or other kinds of factory built housing, or really focusing on zoning issues, there's an enormous amount of consensus out there about what needs to be done. When you look outside in the industry, the consensus appears very bipartisan. If you were at this conference, when people talk, you wouldn't be able to tell what their party affiliation was, because everybody really has a similar vision of what we need to provide the kind of support to the housing market that it needs. I'm just hoping politics doesn't get in the way of that.
Thanks for that, and I'll just end our questions with, what gets you excited? What are you really excited about from an innovative standpoint? I know you mentioned manufactured housing and factory-built, housing as well. Maybe you can expand upon that or share some additional thoughts.
Sure. I actually really believe in the importance of factory built homes. And I've I got to do a little bit of international travel, and the fact is, there are a lot of countries out there that are more effectively bending the cost curve using, whether it's sort of more of a panelized approach or whether it's a full-on manufactured home approach. There's so much more that we could do. And I think the industry is really ready to step up to that. But we have to look at obstacles, whether it's zoning obstacles or availability of financing. We do have to be paying some attention to what happens to people who purchase a manufactured home unit but don't own the land underneath that unit. But there's so much excitement and forward progress in this sector right now. I think it's a really exciting place to be, and would encourage more people to delve into this area if it's not something you know a lot about. The other place where I am seeing an enormous amount of conversation that hasn't yet fully flowered into solutions is around the cost of property hazard insurance. Um, this is a nut that we do have to crack. This is an existential threat to the housing market. We are going to see increased um, threats to the physical homes that we have out there. Just like if you just follow what's happening in Los Angeles after the fires, the number of people who found they were underinsured, what's happening now with insurance in the state. Of course, your state, Raquel, Florida, has been experiencing this for a long time. Um, we need everybody's brain engaged in this conversation because it's going to take a real coordinated effort among not just different housing industry stakeholders, but also the insurance world. We're going to have to work together, and I hope that government can be helpful in this process. It doesn't mean that the solution is a federal solution necessarily, though there are some people calling for that. But the government has the ability to convene and to think broadly and to look back at other, um, you know, how we've gotten through similar crises in the past. And so I think this is a real all hands on deck moment for that issue.
Thank you so much. And we're going to open it up now to some audience questions. So feel free to put a question in the Q&A. I'm also monitoring the chat, and we are recording. I got a little bit late start on the recording for today, but we are recording this community impact briefing, and it will be made available on our website. So with that, let me just see if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask. And like I said, please put it in the Q&A or the chat. Let's see where my Q&A is. Right, nothing yet. I think, Julia, we asked all the good questions.
Wow, nobody has any questions.
No question.
Do you want to ask me more? I mean, I can say
Yeah,
some more things
please
that
do.
I'll just say to this audience, which is, um, you know, it is definitely a confusing time out there now from a federal policy perspective, but we know that housing is an issue that affects everybody, every locality. There's nothing mayors worry about more than housing. And again, this crosses all party lines. There are so many people in Congress who are interested in bipartisan action. You know, something I'm really hoping that we can see at some point is the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act, you know, which has all kinds of bipartisan support. Of course, you know, LIHTC expansion is something that's always important. And um, there are a number of bills out there that relate to housing, some of which even relate to HUD and FHA, that I think would be really interesting conversations for us to be having right now as a country. But it's hard to focus on that when there's so much noise. So I really do encourage people to try to ignore the day to day. I mean, of course, everybody should be paying attention and speaking out, you know, as their conscience dictates. But for this issue in particular, I think if we keep our eye on the ball, there is still the possibility of accomplishing things. And so, you know, just wanted to give that little pep talk.
Well, I think we all needed to hear that. There is a question in the Q&A from Ann DePena. Curious if you think the HUD HC housing counseling grant will continue, as well as HUD certification for counselors. Apologies if you covered this already, but we haven't. So
So it's really hard to know what's happening with the budget. And of course, the budget that's already funded, there is some lack of clarity now on whether agencies can use their budgets. You know, whether obligated funds are going to go out, whether funds that are coming through, you know, the CR, how they're going to be used. We have to keep a pretty close eye on all of this. Now, there is no doubt we're in budget cutting mode. And so that's why I think it's so important for everybody to stay engaged and stay engaged with your partners all across the aisle, because most of the funding, whether it's for housing counseling or whether it's, grants or loans for the production or preservation of affordable housing, um, this is needed by everybody. And it's going to be really important for us to just keep making the case. Uh, Housing counseling, we do need to make the case for it and work with our partners. The lenders want there to be housing counseling out there. This helps sell mortgages. And, the market is a down market right now. So more help selling mortgages is better than less help. Um, I think all of this is, it's a time where things are threatened, and I have no doubt there will be some cuts that I personally would not have advocated for. But the more we can do to keep the importance of the issue in the public eye in an understandable way, to talk to our members of Congress wherever we live, to be talking to our local governments and make sure that they're engaging with the federal government. Um, that's really on us to do that.
And Julia, I think you answered this other question that came in the chat, but I'll just read it for the sake of everyone who's joined the call today. Um, how does this administration, if you have a sense of this, how does this administration view the impact of the housing counseling industry and the importance of its correlation to affordable housing information and financial education?
So, the people who are most important for this are the leadership of FHA. There's a nomination already for an FHA commissioner who comes from the multifamily side. And so I think it's going to be really important, as that person goes through the confirmation process, for him to be hearing about the importance of housing counseling. I know from experience that when you're in a Senate confirmation hearing, you pay pretty close attention to the questions that the senators bring to you. Every nominee meets with senators before they have their confirmation hearing. So it's a really good time to raise this issue up, make sure your senators know about the issue, know to be asking about it, and that people in the industry are working with you alongside. There is a new, both the single family and multifamily teams at HUD now have deputy assistant secretaries. Both of them are very experienced in their fields. And, um, I think being in touch with them will be important, making sure that they have the, uh, not just the data support, but the stories. You know, your stories can be really powerful parts of an advocacy effort.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I just one more round if there are any other questions. I think we've answered the one in the Q&A. We're done there. Well, Julia, just want to thank you again on behalf of NCST, your old home, of course, and just being here today with us. I think, hearing your voice and your insights, your reflections, the positive news that you can share with us has been very, very important for us. I will just say that we don't have any other policy updates today. And for those of you who don't know, Elizabeth Coates, our former director of policy, has taken on a new and exciting position with Senator Slotkin out of Michigan. And so we want to just wish her well. We will update everyone as we have our other community impact briefing calls going forward, which don't miss out for April 16th call. So we'll give folks a little bit of time back. This is being recorded. Like I said, we'll share it on our website. And thank you so much, Julia, for being here and sharing your insights with us. If
Well,
you have
thank you
any,
again for
yeah,
inviting me.
thanks. Everyone have a great rest of your day and thanks for being with us.